We are going to pick the best running back ever from every single team in the NFL. We're not counting all-time greats on their secondary team. Basically, they'll only be counted for their main team, the one they had the most production with. So let's start with the Cardinals and O.J. Anderson. Although he never played in Arizona, he still ranks as the team's all-time leading rusher. In his rookie year, he was selected as a first-team All-Pro. He played for the team for 8 years before going to the Giants and winning 2 Super Bowls. Now for the Falcons, I have William Andrews. But man, this was a tough one. I think Falcons fans themselves would be split on this. Could go with Gerald Riggs, Michael Turner, Warwick Dunn, Jamal Anderson. But Andrews in those 5 years before he tore his ACL was something else. Ravens and Jamal Lewis. This was a pretty easy choice. In 2003, Lewis ran for 2,066 yards, which ranks as the 3rd most in the season. He's the team's all-time leading rusher. I guess Ray Rice could have had a chance to top him, but as we know, that'll never happen.
This is wrong. Lamar Jackson is the best Ravens running back.
The Bills have 2 all-time running backs in their franchise history, Thurman Thomas and O.J. Simpson. Thomas accumulated the most yards in a Bills jersey, but O.J. still edges him out for the best Bills running back ever. He had the best rushing season of all time and carried the offense on some bad Bills teams. So for the Panthers, I went with DeAngelo Williams. I think he was the better running back over his longtime teammate Jonathan Stewart. And I will say, now that the Panthers have extended Christian McCaffrey, he could easily end up making this list within a few years. But for now, he's only been in the league for 3 years. Next up, we have the Bears and Walter Payton, who of course has an argument for being the best running back in league history as well. Payton was selected to both the 70s and 80s NFL All-Decades teams. He only missed 1 game in his entire career and retired as the leader in several rushing categories. Of course, Gale Sayers is also another all-time great for the Bears. Corey Dillon began his career as a Bengal with 6 straight seasons of 1,000 plus rushing yards. Although his time in Cincinnati didn't end in the best way, he's still the best running back in team history. Jim Brown on the Cleveland Browns. Brown was an 8-time first-team All-Pro and 3-time MVP. He'll go down as one of the best American athletes of all time. Next is the Cowboys with a pretty rich history of running backs, but as the league's all-time leading rusher, Emmitt Smith is the choice here. And with the league now trending more toward the passing game, it seems that record won't be broken for a long time. Now we have the Broncos and Terrell Davis, a 2-time Super Bowl champ who did a lot in his short career. That's how you get elected to the Hall of Fame after playing only 7 years in the league. For the Lions, we of course have Barry Sanders, who has almost 3 times as many yards in a Lions uniform than any other player. He was an All-Pro in 6 of his 10 years in the league, and he retired still pretty much on top of the NFL, at least when it comes to individual performance, not the team. While Amon Green may be the Packers' all-time leading rusher, I still have Jim Taylor as my number 1. He was pretty much a scoring machine for Vince Lombardi in the early 60s. Taylor won 4 NFL championships and was the league's MVP in 1962, when he scored 19 touchdowns. Next up, the Texans and Arian Foster. With the Texans' short history, it's easy to pick Foster as the best of the bunch. He dominated the first half of the 2010s until injuries started to slow him down. And he has more than 2 times as many rushing yards and TDs as anyone in Texans history. This was one of the toughest on the list. The Colts do have numerous Hall of Fame running backs, but it's hard to give it to Eric Dickerson or Marshall Faulk when they both had more success with the Rams. The real argument here would be to give it to Baltimore Colts great Lenny Moore. For the Jaguars, it was a 2-horse race. Although Maurice Jones-Drew arguably had a higher peak, Fred Taylor ended up contributing more to the team overall. MJD had 3 seasons with at least 1,000 rushing yards, while Taylor had 7. Even with MJD's All-Pro year in 2011, Taylor's 2000 season still averaged more yards per game. For the Chiefs, it was another duel. Do you go with Jamal Charles or Priest Holmes? I went with Charles mainly because he retired with that insane 5.5 yards per carry, and he didn't have that tremendous Chiefs offensive line that Holmes got to work with. If you put these two in the same situation, I'd say Charles produces more. LADAINIAN Tomlinson was the easy choice for the Chargers. 3-time first-team All-Pro, 2006 MVP, a season where he scored 31 rushing and receiving touchdowns, which I think broke a 40-something-year-old record. On the offensive side of the ball, LT is arguably the best Charger ever. Next up, we have the Rams. Steven Jackson holds the record for the most rushing yards in Rams history, but this title is either for Eric Dickerson or Marshall Faulk. I ended up going with Faulk. I think the great receiving ability puts him over the edge. Larry Csonka for the Dolphins. I don't think there's much debate here. Hall of Famer, won 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl MVP. He was pretty much your classic old-time knock-your-teeth-out runner. Adrian Peterson's 2012 season cemented himself as the greatest running back in Vikings history. That year, he became the last player to make it into the exclusive 2,000 rushing yards club, a list with just 7 names on it. And even without that season, he would still have by far the most rushing yards in team history. For the Patriots, there's not really some era-defining running back in their history. Corey Dillon and Curtis Martin didn't play for them long enough to count. I ended up going with Jim Nantz over Sam Cunningham. If you don't know, Nantz is an AFL legend who set some league rushing records. DEUCE McCALLISTER has a hold on the Saints title for now, but Mark Ingram came extremely close to topping him before he left, and Alvin Kamara could be the one to do it down the line. McCallister was a 2-time Pro Bowler and is in the Saints Hall of Fame. Although Frank Gifford might have been the better player overall, I'd say TIKI Barber is the best fit for the Giants' all-time team at running back. In the mid-2000s, Barber was one of the best backs in the league all the way up until he retired. Now with the Jets, Curtis Martin was incredibly consistent in his career. He had 10 straight seasons with at least 1,000 rushing yards, and he ranks 6th all-time on the career rushing yards list. He goes down in history as one of the best Jets players ever. With the Raiders, I went with Marcus Allen. If we're talking pure talent, I guess you could bring up Bo Jackson, but really no other Raider could match the volume and production Marcus Allen brought to the team. This was a pretty easy choice. Next, we have the Eagles and Steve Van Buren. He was selected to the NFL 100 team. He was a 2-time champion and led the league in rushing 4 times. Although he's fallen to 4th in the team's total rushing yards tally, he dominated the 1940s and is an all-time great. The Steelers. Ended up going with Franco Harris here. There was actually a Steelers fan poll, and about 58% picked Harris as the top running back in team history. Jerome Bettis got 33%. Whichever way you lean, these two are certainly the top 2. Just don't be in that 8% that picks Le'Veon Bell. Selecting Joe Perry for the Niners is probably going to be somewhat controversial. Plenty of people think it's Frank Gore, but Perry was a 2-time All-Pro in 1954 Player of the Year. He actually played more years for the Niners than Gore too. He averaged more yards per carry and could run a 100-yard dash in 9.5 seconds, for all you people who don't believe old-timers were fast. With the Seahawks, I think it's between Sean Alexander or Marshawn Lynch. This could be one of the most fascinating debates from this video. I'm going to go with Alexander, although he did have a tremendous O-line that might have boosted his stats. I think there's a trio of bucks in the backfield that could be argued here. James Wilder, Warwick Dunn, and Mike Allstott. I've got Allstott. Even though he was a fullback, he was still a multi-dimensional weapon that at times just couldn't be stopped. Earl Campbell was obviously a Houston Oiler, but it's still the same franchise. He had one of the best starts to any career in history after averaging over 110 rushing yards a game in his first 3 years. If we're talking Titans only, then we'd be talking Eddie George, then Chris Johnson. Finally, with the Redskins, we're going with John Riggins. He's got a Super Bowl MVP to his name, and at age 34 and 35, he led the NFL in touchdowns. That's it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Be sure to check out my other stuff, and remember to sub it up.
Great. Now let's get this video to 10 minutes.